Hi, welcome everybody. This is a pitch workshop for the Screenwriters Network, and my name is Connor Kyle. Scott, you want to say hi?
I am Scott Barkin. Happy to be here with you guys.
And today we are going to be taking a bunch of just movie pitches of any genre from the students who have shown up. The first thing is that me and Scott are not able to buy or produce your script. This is
Speak
just
for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you would like to go right ahead,
I'm able to buy it very cheaply.
There you go. This workshop is mostly just for fun and also just for refinement of your idea. We are both of us very interested in how concepts work, how to refine concepts, how to get them and express them in the clearest possible way that sells your movie and blooms in the mind to suggest a complete and compelling story. We're looking for original, clear, high concept pitches. It's very difficult to kind of weigh in on very execution dependent movie ideas. If you say like, this is a drama about a guy navigating the troubled relationship with his father in their small town in like rural Alabama, we're like, that could be great or that could be terrible. We're operating here on the basis of the concept is the first thing that sort of sells your movie. And that's what gets someone interested in reading you, which is so essential.
I don't want people to think they can't pitch a drama, but if you are pitching a drama, the idea is to be able to convey to us, like what is going to be special and unique about your drama. So it's not that, dramas are inherently sort of execution dependent, but you still want to find a way, because obviously people write them, people sell them. You want to find a way to be able to highlight
what makes your story, the world of it, the characters in it unique, and what is a journey that we're going to watch that we haven't necessarily seen, 100 times before.
Yeah.
Start with just lead with either these comps or just a very brief explanation of the tone if it's going to drastically affect how someone's going to start picturing your story. Because this is very important for pitches. If people start picturing the wrong thing and then you get to the end or even the middle of it and they're like, wait, what? I thought this was something else. Then it kind of throws off, you lose their concentration. And so if your movie is, for instance, a creature feature, there's many different tones within that. So if it's essential for you to say at the beginning, this is like a fun creature feature with a tone like Tremors, that kind of tells you something very different than if you say this is like a really serious horror movie like The Witch, and then you describe a movie about a killer sheep or something, right? Like if you confuse your audience, or if you confuse the listener and they're like, you're pitching me a really deadly serious period piece drama horror about a killer sheep, they might get thrown off before you even get that far into it. So definitely do clarify at the beginning if there's something we sort of need to keep in mind while going in. I'll also say make sure to have clearly laid out your story's kind of walls, either like a time frame, boundaries, or some kind of ticking clock that's going to be pushing us through the story. If we are left with this kind of vague and nebulous sense of we don't know when this journey is going to kind of be done, then we don't really have a clear picture of what the movie will be. So it can be really nice to have that ticking clock. The sort of standard format for a logline is for a reason. It's when inciting incident, protagonist must goal before stakes or ticking clock, right? Before bad thing happens or within the one crazy night, some kind of walls around it so that we understand what the sort of boundaries of your story are going to be. We don't think we're just going to be kind of floating loose. If you anchor us with these things, it can be really helpful. So I don't include background or context that isn't absolutely essential. Sometimes in pitches, people will include stuff like, I thought of this while I was jogging with my dad, and then go on to a brief tangent about how they used to live in Arkansas and their dad was a great runner. And then it's like, oh, the story isn't about your dad, though, is it? You're kind of just giving us info on how you came up with this idea. This is just kind of wasting your time within your pitch, your allotted pitch time. Also, don't use character names unless your story is based on a real person or a public domain character. We're not going to remember your characters' names. Even if you look back at your favorite movies, like how many of the main characters' names do you remember? And then think of the people you're pitching these things to are going to hear tons of pitches every day. They're definitely not going to remember your characters' names. So that's why it's on you to make clear who your protagonist is without having to rely on those names. So if it's something like, a young Benjamin Franklin's adventures, then you probably would want to say that because that tells us when and where we are as well. Focus on your main character. The only characters you probably mention in the logline and throughout, or in the logline at least, just your protagonist and maybe the antagonist or central relationship. In the pitch itself, you don't really need to go into side characters or subplots. Just focus on the main through line. Ask yourself why this specific protagonist, and what we're trying to do is imply an internal journey that's going to intertwine with the external one. So here's an example. I pulled a lot of examples off of just Reddit movie pitch subreddits to kind of dissect. A purge type society where every day at midnight, a random citizen is chosen to be publicly hunted for a bounty. A man becomes the target and must escape. It's like, okay, that's a cool hook, but why this guy? Just a guy? In that case, you're trying to sell the entire story on just the external events that are happening. And we aren't understanding that the character's journey has to tie intrinsically in with this. With motivation and urgency, it should be clear that your character has to act. It's red flags to avoid are things like our character decides to do something, because that is kind of implying that they are just sort of choosing to do it, which can sometimes work, but just be careful with these things where we feel like there's not a strong motivation for our character to get involved in the story, or perhaps their conflict doesn't have the highest possible stakes and consequences for your genre. Movies are stories that can only happen once and in one specific way. And typically you want to be pushing the stakes and consequences to the highest possible place for whatever world it is that you're within, right? Like if it's a horror movie and there's not a threat of death, you have to have a really good reason why. Or if this is the highest stakes and consequences aren't necessarily always you're going to get murdered, but divorce, it could be losing a best friend in certain genres can be these highest possible stakes. Movies shouldn't really feel episodic, like it's a series of situations that could be repeatable, like a TV show, and it shouldn't seem overly internal, like a novel where the main conflict is all going to be stuff that is happening within our character's mind.
I would only add that there are certain times when background context about who you are and what your connection to this material is important to include. So if it is based on some very personal experience or some part of your background or who you are, that's typically something that producers actually do want to know. So I would only say that include that if you really do have some special connection to the material or that inspired the material, because then it shows why you are the person who is the right person to tell that story in particular. And it helps me understand that you might have a particular insight to how that story would play out.
I totally agree. And I think it was a Script Notes episode or some podcast like that where somebody wrote in and was like, hey, I'm an ex-convict. Am I going to be able to get writing jobs in Hollywood? And one of their responses is there are certain shows that might actually look very favorably upon that. You might end up being able to write for Sons of Anarchy or something pretty easily if you have had that really close personal experience with this material, or if you're writing about some kind of background that is linked to your religion or folk belief or like national origin, or maybe your family's history, something like The Farewell, which is like just very tied to the writer's personal history. Those things can be really good to highlight. I want to talk about these ideas of hook and journey, which are the two things that I talk about most in terms of just movie concepts. I saw on one of these movie subreddits, like a one-take action film like 1917, but it's set in Vietnam. And it's like, that's so vague that it's not even ready for a workshop, really. That is just an idea for an idea. There's no hook implied, really, besides that it's a one-take film, but that is kind of a directing hook, not really a story hook. And there's nothing really implying what the journey will be. We don't have a main character. This one has almost nothing. So if this is all that you have for your idea currently, not quite ready to be dissected like this. Let's look at hook, though. So your story might sound, without a proper hook, your story might just sound kind of down the middle and more like a description of the genre itself than a strong take. We're looking for specificity. Here's when her family is murdered, a Brooklyn housewife must hunt down the killers and get revenge. It's like, what's the hook? That she's from Brooklyn? We're looking at, we want a specific character who's going through a journey that we have not seen in the exact same way before. If we do have a clear hook, but we don't have a clear journey, we end up with what a lot of people kind of view as this is what movie ideas are. And if you go to a lot of, somebody will be like, I have a great idea for a movie. It'll just be the hook. And what's not as clear or discussed is that that is not a complete idea on its own. So what is the actual goalpost? The and then what syndrome is the biggest thing that I see in pitches, the biggest flaw that I see in pitches. So here's one I saw off a writing prompt subreddit. And the issue with these is that they often feel more like writing prompts because they don't include the journey. They're just the kind of, isn't that idea cool? A depressed guy moves into a haunted house with 7 demons, each representing one of the deadly sins. But they're all trying to help him get back on his feet. Lust helps him get laid, pride helps him with confidence, etc. So that's a nice hook. It's like Casper meets Inside Out. Great, but getting back on your feet is an intangible objective. We don't know what that means in terms of your movie. How do we know he's back on his feet? He has to, rob a bank again? Win over his ex and his child? Like, we need some sense of what are we going to be watching over the course of the movie? We don't want to hear just a fun idea and an inciting incident. You got to imply the rest of it as well. And last, we have just execution-dependent ideas, which are pretty much all there, but are just hard to comment on more because they seem to rely on style, performances, cinematography, directing, or other factors which are just sort of difficult to express in your pitch, or maybe you haven't adequately expressed in your pitch. So something like John Wick, I feel, is one of the best examples of this, which is a really successful franchise and a really fun series of movies. But when you describe it, it sounds sort of just more like a description of the genre. When something bad happens to a retired hitman, he comes out of retirement to get revenge on the bad guys. And become climb to the top of the hitman world yet again, which sort of sounds like a million other movies like this, but it has this very sort of intangible and difficult to describe sense of style and world, which are not necessarily going to fit into a pitch neatly. Let's go ahead and post your log lines.
People are typing.
We'd play the Jeopardy music now if we had a proper music bot in the channel.
Go with, I dreamt I was a teenage vampire.
All right. So, Lucia, do you want to hop on mic and read us your log line?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. Sure, I'll read it now.
Hello there.
I dreamt I was a teenage vampire, horror/comedy. When a former high school queen bee and closeted lesbian struggling with latent vampirism comes into her freshman year of college and finds herself at the bottom of the social food chain, she needs to get into the top sorority or enter social outcast status, all while fighting a losing battle against her desire for blood and the fact that she's a terrible, unlikable person.
I have some questions. What is latent vampirism?
That is a good question.
Latent vampirism is when you're born a vampire but have never tasted blood, and it can be suppressed with medication. So she's like a vampire but not fully.
So
Okay.
Is this a world in which vampires are part of the society?
Yes.
Okay, well that's
a big thing. Yes.
thing.
So she's not the only vampire.
Yeah. So off the bat, that's like that whole world is something that needs to be upfront. The pitch should start with, in a world where vampires have been integrated into society or something like that, such and such occurs, right? So because reading this log line, there's no indication of that, which is why that's the first, big thing. So I think that's probably a good jumping off point for you to just give us a little more context here, so we can understand more fully what you have in mind, since this is actually not just a vampire in our world, but an alternate world where this story is happening.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of world building going on here. So, Lucia, we're gonna give you about a minute. I'm gonna have a clock, but it won't be super strict, so don't stress out. Towards the end, I'll put a clock emoji in the chat or something if you're going a little long. But this is about 3-ish paragraphs of pitch material. So.
Okay, thanks for that. So basically, in the world, vampires exist, but they were sort of hunted to be a rarity, and the ones that do exist are kind of very much outcast. It's sort of oh, ew, you're a vampire. That's kind of scary and lame, but not threatening. Even though they are very powerful, okay. There just aren't enough of them for there to be a thing. So she sort of goes into college. She was a Regina George at her high school. And she's basically thematically struggling with the question of whether or not she should continue lying and pretending to be a good human for social acceptance, or if she should accept her awful vampire monster nature and give into the bloodlust full on. And the sorority folks think she's an awful person, which she is. So she gets desperate and tries to hang out with the outcast to look nice. but there's another vampire there who sort of clues her into like the vampires are coming back.
Hey, that's a minute. Thank you so much. You want to weigh in, Scott?
Yeah, well, I mean, my first question, I mean, aside from, I have a lot of questions I would like to know about the world, but I think as far as the story is concerned, what I'm wondering about are really the stakes of this situation. Becoming popular or reaching some kind of social status is a want, but it is not a need. So like, what is her like real emotional goal? What are the emotional stakes of this situation? And like, I know we said you're not going to have to talk about the end, but often in pitches, people will ask you what the end is. So you might want to think about that. But like at the end of this journey, is this like a journey about self-acceptance? Like, are you doing a parallel to, modern social issues, like, say, trans or queer issues? Or race issues? Like, is that what you're sort of commenting on with this?
Accepting who she is, because the central question is like, should you accept who you are, even if who you are is a bad person?
Okay.
So at the end, the sorority rejects her, and she just goes into full rage mode and kills everyone and burns down the campus.
Okay, so sorry.
And as for the queer thing, she's also gay.
Oh, so right, that's right. That's
and closeted.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that. Okay, so I think the roadblock you're going to have with this journey is asking yourself should you accept who you are even if you're a bad person? The answer is no. I mean, it's like the answer is universally no. I don't think anyone is going to say you should accept that you're a bad person. So I see an inherent struggle there in the journey that you have in mind for her, and like I mean, it's one thing for her to be an anti-hero, but if you're trying to make, and just like, if it's going to be a tale of descent into, carnage, that's okay. But I don't know if that question as a sort of a thematic argument is one that is going to fly. I don't know. What do you think, Connor?
My thoughts are going to primarily revolve around that I don't know what we're really watching our main character do in this movie. Like, you have a lot of words here that are describing her sort of internalness. That's not a word. Interiority. A terrible, unlikable person, former high school queen bee and closeted lesbian. But what are we actually watching her do? She's going through sorority pledges. What is like the sort of, what are we physically watching her do in the movie?
Go through sorority pledges, try and seduce popular boys, struggling not to eat red meat, very obviously, hooking up with another vampire who's also a girl.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a bit, I kind of understand what you mean then, but I'm with Scott in that it seems like this is kind of just enter social outcast status is kind of a strange level of stakes. I mean, that's kind of an intangible level of stakes. I feel like maybe you'd be in a stronger position if at the very beginning her vampirism causes a huge problem that makes her into this social outcast or something, or like including something like that in your pitch. So we see it's not just, the stakes right now just seem like she's going to be lonely if she doesn't do this. While we understand that that's bad, you later have her murking vampires and killing people and like doing all this. Like, the stakes don't seem to match with where the action of your story goes.
I definitely like the fact that like she's sort of outed at first.
Oh, being outed as a vampire and being outed, like being tied into her LGBT identity is a great way into this story. Like, that is probably what you want to be starting with. I also am not totally sure if this is something you've written, then obviously you're not really in a position to change this, but if this is like a really world building heavy movie with, like where you have to understand, like, so the different cliques, are those different sort of monsters? Like, what are those dolls? Like brats? Don't Bratz dolls have that kind of vibe with the Monster High or whatever? Where is that how this is divided, or is this just like a sort of world of darkness where there's like this is like Dresden Files, Urban Arcana, where there's like every third or fourth person is like a Frankenstein or a mummy or something?
More towards the Urban Arcana, but it's sort of like having like a rare disease, sort of.
Right. So the vampirism is the only thing in the world that is different than our world. It's not a bunch of monsters or other stuff like that.
Yeah, I was debating including werewolves in a similar situation, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say this just seems a little episodic to me then in that case. Like, your goal is get into a sorority, and we understand that she's going to be doing one thing and then another thing and then another thing to sort of just like earn their favor, I suppose. But this makes this sound like a TV show to me because you don't have a strong central, quote, battle of the bands, which is something that I call it. But obviously it doesn't have to actually be a battle of the bands. But coming of age stories will often, there's a reason why they fall back on, oh God, we need some kind of goalpost that shows that our internal and external journeys are finished now. So, okay, a battle of the bands that they're working up to. So I would suggest picking a more specific goalpost that we understand, like, what are we actually watching her do over the course of this movie? Like one strong central thing, like what does she need to actually do to get into that top sorority?
Yeah, I would also add, I mean, I can see how, what she's getting at, movies like, Mean Girls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously a type of movie that exists where people are just navigating these social structures and they're outcast for whatever reason. And, the goal of being popular is a goal in many of these types of movies. But I think I'm just going to come back to what I said before is in all of these types of movies, we sympathize with the outsider, and we understand that they want to be popular, but we know deep down within ourselves that popularity is not really a valuable goal to achieve, and they need to be achieving something emotionally on a deeper level by the time they're at the end of this journey. So I think what I'm really latching onto about this is the ending that you've described of her just disintegrating and embracing her worst self, I think is going to be a roadblock to people getting invested in this story, because we generally, unless it's a really dark movie, but you're pitching this as a sort of horror comedy, so it's hard to see the comedy in that situation, aside from, brutal and gory kills that might happen, which is sometimes what people lean on as far as horror comedy is concerned. But like our central character choosing evil at the end and choosing to kill everyone, I think is going to be a difficulty in this project and getting people on board with it. So I would recommend trying to figure out a way that in the end, to make it more analog to the types of movies like this that exist, she is finding a way to, sort of accept herself in some fashion and prove her, value to the world that isn't just, a murderous rampage, Otherwise, I don't know what the market is for this movie.
All right. Hope that probably gives you a lot to chew on, Lucia. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. All right, you want to pick one?
Yeah, I'll pick one, and then we'll just weigh in first on whichever one that we choose. I want to do Phoenicia. Let's do My Pet, this horror thriller.
When a college freshman catches the eye of a biotech mogul's son, she has to steal the subservient clone he made of her to regain control of her life.
I feel like we've missed it. We're skipping a step here.
Yeah, well, the regain control of her life is the part where, because I understand there's a college freshman. I understand she attracts the eye of the biotech mogul's son. Okay. Then she suddenly has to steal the clone he made to regain control of her life. So yeah, like that feels like a leap. And like you miss the part, I guess, where he creates the clone, like it should be, but when he creates a clone that takes over her life, she needs to regain control. I guess is like, it feels like the order of events is backwards.
Yeah, I'm thinking, where did she lose control of her life? All she did in the first sentence was like a guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I feel like we were going down a set of stairs and then we skipped over one a little bit. But maybe in your it would be a good time to clarify in your
tell us more.
Launch into the 1 minute. I'm curious. I like this stuff. So go ahead and give us the rest.
So Celeste is a bored college freshman stuck at school over break. She gets invited to a fancy party thrown by this biotech mogul's son. It turns out that she's just his type. He embarrasses her, but he sends a $1,000 bottle of champagne as an apology. When she goes to return it, he's shamelessly working out in the buff. He's an asshole, but she's enticed by his looks and his lifestyle. But then he discovers secrets that she never shared with anyone, like her self-harm scars. Someone sends explicit videos starring her doing things that she never did. And when she starts digging into what's going on, she discovers his latest prototype, a creature that's been mimicking her shape. Now she has to figure out a way to liberate it so she can take control of her life back.
All right, good timing on that. You were at 45 seconds exactly. Good pre-work, I will say. So my feedback on this is that, yeah, I think you have a lot of really good thriller stuff here, but in the log line, I think your first sentence should probably be more like when when a college freshman is stalked by, you probably want to avoid the passive thing, but we're missing the part where starts getting like stalked by this guy, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask. So was it when they met at the party? Did he already know her, or is like the audience meant to think that's their first meeting, but it's not?
No, it is their first meeting.
It is their first meeting. So why does he choose her?
Just because of her physical appearance.
Yeah, I can get how this is sort of like a 50
attractive.
Shades. This is like, this sort of this is like an erotic thriller almost, isn't it? Where the closer you get to this person, the more you realize that they're, actually crazy and dangerous in whatever way, but you can't stay away because of that, carnal attraction or whatever. Would you see this as a kind of an erotic sci-fi thriller?
Yeah, there's definitely an erotic element to it.
I'm still struggling with his motives, I guess. Like, so she likes him, he likes her, right? If he's got her, why does he need to clone her?
So in the log line, I describe it as a clone because that's like a very straightforward way of understanding it. But actually, it's a creature that can take on the shape of anyone. So he already has this, but he's been using it to copy her to gain more control over her because she's still sort of like hot and cold on him because she is attracted to him, but he's also an asshole. Gain leverage,
make it look like her and go out into the world and do things that make her look bad. And this, if you won't be with me. Yeah,
basically. So it's like things like filming it, doing sexually explicit stuff.
Okay.
Just so odd. Like, why isn't this like? Why is it all a secret? I'm struggling with the general sort of reality equation and the motivations. Like, if it can look like her and be like her, why does he need her?
Omen finds out that this guy that she likes that seems really cool is actually, he clones people that he's in love with, and now she needs to rescue or liberate those clones. That seems like the core of it, and everything else is maybe a little overcomplicated here. This isn't the way you have to go. Obviously, you don't have to go any specific way that we suggest. But if, for instance, the story was college freshman meets Elon Musk's son, and he's the coolest guy ever, but then she goes into his basement, and holy crap, there's like row upon row of clones down there. Now he's like, oh, you've discovered my secret. Now my clones are going to have to kill you now, and she has to rescue or like get the clones on her side or find her own clone and have some kind of, relationship with that and get out. That would be a lot more. It seems like we have the same set pieces in that, but it's a much more straightforward way through it. Obviously, if you've already written this or you have a lot of other stuff going on in it, you don't need to follow any specific advice that we give, but just to me, I'm thinking, how do we get those cool set pieces in a way that doesn't seem so kind of circuitous and like his scheme is just kind of crazy?
Yeah, I guess I foresaw this as something like a very slow burn where she doesn't discover the clone until the third act, kind of something like Midsummer, where you don't really know what's going on until the very end. Until the third act.
Right. So that's
quite a long way.
That's a big like twist, you're saying, basically, in the ending, that so the whole time she's wondering, how is this happening? What is this me that is doing these things? And then in the end, you're revealing that it is this creature. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, then in that case, the journey of the movie is not that she has to steal a clone; it's that she has to figure out how is there two of me, and how is it linked to this guy? This is a mystery. This isn't like a heist movie, which it is implied by the fact that you're sort of saying the main journey is that she has to steal or kidnap something. Makes me think the majority of the second act, like the logline, is telling us what's going to be in your second act. So the fact that this happens all the way at the end tells me that your movie is actually a mystery about a woman trying to find out who's doing this.
Yeah. It's sort of like, what was that Stephen King? The Outsider, that was just on HBO. And the whole, it starts with this same kind of premise. Jason Bateman is accused of these murders, and they have on video him doing it, basically, or something like that. But he's like it wasn't me, I wasn't there. So who is this copy of me and how is this possible? And the whole rest of the series is unraveling that. And it is basically like what the ultimate reveal is basically like what you're saying. It's like a weird monster that can sort of take shape of people, but you don't know that until, sorry, spoiler. Sorry, I should have said a spoiler, but
It's all good.
you don't know that until the very last couple of episodes, So yeah, I think Connor's totally right that the way you have framed this logline is planting ideas in our mind of a certain expectation, and that's why our questions to you are so like, well, explain this. But if you phrase the logline correctly, then it's like, okay, we're going to have this reveal, and then the whole thing is like, where's this copy coming from? And that could be fun to investigate. At the end of the day, when the reveal happens, people might be like, that's an absurd reveal, but at least we were paired for that by the log line delivering like what the actual story is.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I want you to weigh in the chat and help us diagnose the issue with this comedy logline. This is from one of those movie pitch subreddits. And it's one of these ones that has like a fun hook, but is missing some things. So tell us what we're missing here. I'm going to read it out. An actual Nigerian prince has a spiritual awakening and decides he must get rid of his wealth and status. But despite his best efforts, he can't give away his fortune or his claim to the throne. He's very confused why everyone is angry at him for trying. Tell us what's missing here. Smish and Maria say stakes. Yes. What happens if he doesn't give it away? Absolutely. What are we watching him do, says Lucky. Yep, that's the big one, isn't it? Our biggest things are, you're right on the money, stakes, motivation, and urgency. So this is a good hook, but it lacks both motivation, like he has a spiritual awakening and just decides he has to do this. Like, we can maybe buy that in certain genres like this to some extent. Stakes and urgency are the things that we're missing that tell us what happens if he doesn't do this. What is the ticking clock that is pushing us through the story? What my suggestion is going to be is usually here that a strong central relationship will fix a lot of these issues. Here's my suggestion. His spoiled teenage daughter is the protagonist. Her goal is to stop him, to save her inheritance. So now we have a movie going on. Her motivation is, I want to stay rich and important and save the future fortune that I'm entitled to. Stakes are, I'll be poor if I fail, and I don't want to be. Her dad wants to be poor. Plus, this will destroy my relationship with my dad. And the urgency then becomes, I have to stop him before he gives it all away.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all makes sense. But the biggest issue is, like, he just is a guy sitting at a computer. He's not a hero of anything, he seems like a dope. It's like a joke, this is like a punchline, like, oh, isn't it funny if a Nigerian, one of those scams was real, but he has no journey and anything. So I think you're right. You got to find another character to be trying to stop this from happening. Otherwise, if he's going to actually become active, then he needs to like fly somewhere and get boots on the ground, and then we have like Coming to America almost, or something like that. So, and that's been done, as we know.
Yes.
So yeah, there's probably no like way to turn this into a great idea.
Right. I will say something that people often get mixed up with is just because something's funny doesn't mean it's a good movie idea necessarily.
Yeah.
Smish says, couldn't he just drop his money off a helicopter? Yeah, exactly. Just take it all out in cash and just distribute it.
Doesn't seem like it would be hard to actually give it away.
Right. It would only be hard if the only way he thought that he could possibly give it away is through emails to strangers. Let's pick another logline. A lot of thrillers. Glad to see it.
Yeah, let's go. I liked this last one that came in here, 3-Ton Coffin, action thriller.
Good title.
Curious about that one.
Hey folks, I'm just going to have to read Jack's logline here because we had a couple audio issues. 3-Ton Coffin, action thriller. An out-of-work stunt driver and his estranged ex-con son unwittingly steal a bait car to carry out a heist meant to pay off the parolee's former cellmate, who has taken one of their loved ones as collateral. Thank you, Jack.
Okay, I'm tripping over just something in the logline. They unwittingly steal a car to carry out a heist.
Pretty a car the police set out that are meant to.
Oh, so the unwitting part is that they have stolen a trap car. The unwitting part is not that they're carrying out a heist, because the way that the sentence flows, it's ambiguous what you mean. What is the unwitting part?
Yeah, it's the car part that they steal a car that's being monitored by the LAPD.
Didn't accidentally steal a car. They accidentally
Right. Exactly.
stole a car that the accident was that it turned out to be a bait car.
Yeah, that's right.
Their goal was to use the car to carry out a heist to pay off the parolee's former cellmate who has taken one of them hostage. But the fact that it is a bait car has now caused complication. That's correct?
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So we assume the police are onto them this entire time. Maybe we should just move ahead into the pitch part.
Yeah, tell us more.
Go ahead.
So it opens with this father and son duo who they end up stealing this car in this quiet neighborhood, and they take it to their heist. And in the middle of their heist, as it's going off without a hitch, suddenly police just descend upon them. The driver, who's the former stuntman father, ends up pulling a getaway onto the freeway, but they find themselves being chased by the LAPD, as well as the gang of gangsters that they have ripped off. The LAPD engage mechanisms that turn the car off, at which point they have to try to hotwire the car as it's moving. And this progresses in real time, basically, all the way across the freeway until they can reach their destination. And this script would take place entirely within the bait car in real time.
All right. That's it's also good timing. You ended at like 55 seconds. Nice work. Go ahead, Scott.
Name of the movie should be Bait Car. if the whole thing is playing off that, I think. I'm 3-ton coffin is like a cool phrase, but it's like it doesn't tell us anything about what is unique about this, So I personally like a title that tells me what I'm seeing. So something to consider. Obviously, reasonable people could disagree about that. But what I want to know is, so once the chase is on, you mentioned like one thing that is specific to the bait car. And I like that idea that the police have the ability to turn off the car in some way. And that's really interesting, and something for them to overcome that is specific in that I haven't seen in another movie. Is there more? Because before you said that, my feeling was, okay, so this is just a setup that gets us into a chase movie, and there are a lot of chase movies out there. So I want more specificity than that. And so, but that little detail you gave us about the bait car and then being able to turn it off did pique my interest, because that's specific to this idea. But I am not clear on if the rest of the second act actually has a bunch of games like that you're able to play, or is that it?
I'm with you here. If I could just add one thing before you respond, I would say that, it seems like to me the only way that we can have a car chase movie is for them to deactivate it almost right away. It's for the main characters to bypass or disable the police's ability to override the car almost right away. Otherwise, how far are they even going to get in this heist? And once you've disabled the bait car's, technology, then we're just in a regular car chase, aren't we?
Yeah. So what happens during the car chase is they disable it as they're already on the freeway, going full speed down the freeway. So they end up rolling, and these police cars just keep tailing them basically the entire way. And at the same time, this gang of gangsters ends up in pursuit as well, because they are tracking the cash that was just stolen off them. So you have these two cars pursuing them, knocking them along the freeway as they're trying to hotwire the car. And the catch with them hotwiring the car is the son, who is an experienced carjacker, is injured. So he cannot operate. He cannot do what is necessary to get the car moving. So he has to walk his father through hotwiring the car.
And by hotwiring, you mean getting it started, or you mean disabling the police tracking? Or
I think both. He's got to bypass their control and then get the engine going so they can drive, right? So
yeah, that's right.
To me, that sounds like one sequence, like that.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's the the entirety of the rest of the movie somehow?
Yeah, so that basically takes up the second act, which is the big hook of it. The third act ends up with the son getting away, Sam's father, unfortunately, and having to try to find the men that are still holding his son hostage, as he has this bag full of money, and that becomes the third act.
So the third act has nothing to do with the car.
No, he's still in the big
He's
car.
still in the car. Oh, getting away in the car. Sorry. Yeah, I mean,
I feel there's a high concept
sorry,
idea.
Connor,
I'm sorry.
you go.
I feel there's a high concept action thriller in here, but the way that you've laid it out, it kind of makes it seem like we have to obviate or get rid of we have to disable the hook in order to make the movie work. Because if the police have any ability to disable or manipulate this car, they're going to do that, right? Why would they wait to do that? And what is disabling this thing that's taking up the majority of our second act, as you mentioned? Is that just guys pressing buttons in a car?
No, so they basically have a device. The people that are following them, this trap unit, has a device that they have inserted within the ignition sequence that is able to shut off the engine. So once they're able to disable that, LAPD no longer has the ability to disable the car. So then from that point, it becomes just a normal chase sequence.
Okay. Then I'm wondering if why do we, it just seems like that was kind of the hook of your movie that we have to now gotten rid of in some way. I'm not sure if I have that right. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I'm where I'm stumbling is, one, like Connor was saying, as soon as they steal the car, if it's a bait car, assume people are monitoring what's going on with it, right? So what are they how are they even able to pull it away from that parking space or, before it gets shut down? And then I guess the other thing is once it is shut down and they're just rolling, why can the cops not stop them? You could put a cop car in front of that car and just slow down until they are stopped. So I'm really struggling to understand how all these obvious obstacles are somehow being bypassed. And then once they do, disable it, if they get to a point where they're able to drive it, then we're just in a chase movie, which, I'm not sure what's going to be particularly fun about more car chases, which we have plenty of.
Yeah, no, I think that's where the speed part comes in. Is the you get the hook until the third act, and then the third act becomes just like a hostage movie in a way.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure that works today. So I think this is an important thing. You look at a movie like Speed, and you say, well, Speed did that, but Speed came out in 1995 or whatever that was. So we're 25 years post Speed, right? So our ideas at this point need to sort of argue for their own existence in a way, in taking into consideration the fact that Speed already exists, and movies like that already exist. So the concept like this needs to be able to provide a game that can sustain us all the way until the end of the movie. You can't just discount, the third act is just a hostage thing that's nothing special. Mm-hmm. You got to hold yourself to a higher standard than that.
Yeah, of course. I hear you. Thank you guys. I really appreciate this, by the way.
Thank you. And great title sounds like an awesome Western, I will say.
I think there's something here. I love the idea of this bait car. I just want to see more. I want to know more what they can do with it. Just shutting off the cars and doesn't seem like enough to sustain a movie, but I think you're onto something with that idea because I've never even heard of that concept. And so that's another thing you would find a way to illuminate in the log line here is somehow work in a bait car, a car planted by the police to
trap car feels like more of a familiar term.
Neither of them to me is familiar.
Yeah, I've never heard either, but that I'm sure some people have. But take a poll. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I think either way, you probably need to put the explanation in because it's definitely not a universal thing.
I want to do a different genre. Let's do a sci-fi.
Sure.
General Ray, do you want to read Power Couple? That sounds cool.
A driven young woman worried about losing her boyfriend during grad school cyrogenically freezes herself to preserve her perfect relationship, only to find herself trapped in her own mind, playing out a series of increasingly catastrophic possible futures, facing the possibility that she's made a huge mistake.
So I'm going to read this to myself one time.
Me too.
So She's worried about a woman in grad school is worried that she's going to lose her boyfriend. So she cryogenically freezes herself to preserve the relationship. Well, in what way does it, how do you have a relationship? I guess maybe there's something I'm missing here. How do you even have a relationship if you're frozen?
They're both so wrapped up in grad school, and they have this, she has this extreme dedication to being a power couple and having the perfect future and the perfect relationship. But while they're both working for these goals separately, they can't spend any time with each other. So they decide to take turns freezing themselves.
Whoa. Okay, I think maybe you better just go through from beginning to end. I'll give you the full minute on the clock, and you can just take us right through it.
This woman meets the guy that she thinks is perfect and that she's going to have the perfect future with. And she, basically, the first time that she goes out on a date with him, he notices that like she has this canister in the back of her freezer. This is, by the way, I should have said all of this beforehand. This is like a near future sort of sci-fi where there's missions to Mars and people freezing themselves and stuff like that, but just like very near future. So she basically just sees her future with this guy the second that she meets him and becomes completely dedicated to making it happen and doing whatever needs to be done to make it happen. And that's how she comes up with this scheme to have the perfect life, which involves, first, he's going to freeze himself while she goes to med school, and then she's going to freeze herself while he goes to law school. And what happens is that he freezes himself first. And this all happens in the first act. They meet, they fall in love. They come up with this crazy scheme, and he freezes himself right before it's her turn to go under. She gets this opportunity. So she has this best friend who's kind of her ride or die, really important to her. And her best friend is the person who works at the cryogenics lab. That's how she sort of learns about it. Her best friend is a neuroscientist. She's going to be a doctor. And her best friend essentially gives her an opportunity to go on a mission to Mars, which is this amazing accomplishment. So she ends up with this huge career relationship conflict, and she chooses the relationship and goes under and freezes. So the second act is basically her being frozen, and what happens when she's frozen is that like she freezes, she wakes up, it feels instantaneous, and she's alone in an empty apartment, and he's abandoned her. He's not there waiting for her, and she has to deal with that. But she has to go figure out where he's gone and why he's abandoned her. She figures out that he has left her for her ex. Then she starts to cry and hears a weird tone and then wakes up again. So the whole second act, just to speed through it, is essentially her having repeated false waking up of these catastrophic future scenarios she's running through in her head. That's the whole second act. And then the third act resolves everything in the real world.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Wow. So I have some questions. How does freezing themselves preserve their relationship? Like, the logic there is a big leap for me. I'm not quite getting it.
So that is a little hard to set up. They have this conversation where they realize that they're drifting apart because they're spending no time together. And basically, at this point, the lead has already heard about all this cryogenic freezing stuff from her friend. So when her boyfriend grabs her by the hand and like looks her deep in the eyes and says like, I know we're having all of these troubles. It's really hard. I just wish we met each other too soon. We met when we were 21. I wish we'd met when we were already fully formed people, and then we'd be ready to like start on these perfect lives we're supposed to have with each other. And that's what gives her the idea that they can essentially use the freezing to make it so they've met each other at the right time in their lives.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, in a distant way, I can understand like, oh, if we could just skip to where we have already learned all these things about life in the world, then we could be together. But I think there's a fundamental discrepancy between our problem is we don't see each other enough, and our solution is we see each other less. I just can't wrap my head around anybody actually pulling the trigger on that, because what you're saying is like, we're struggling right now because we don't spend enough time together, but I'm going to go into a cryogenically frozen pod or whatever while you do, 4 years of school or whatever, and somehow convincing myself that through all that time you're going to be unwavering in your dedication, even though we started this in the middle of having problems. Like it seems very illogical.
I'm with you here. I'm not seeing how you even so the presupposition, I guess, being that we're at different ages or different stages in our life is what you're saying, I guess, right? And so we both have separate stuff that we want to do, and we don't want the other person to age while we are doing that, so that they don't sort of waste their am I on the right track here? It's so their plan is basically, I will do stuff in my life that I just need to get done while you are in like hypersleep, basically. Okay, and therefore we will eventually even out so that we're both like 30 or whatever, and we have accomplished all the stuff that we can only do without the other person, maybe?
Yes, and then they don't have to feel guilty about neglecting the other person, and that the other person isn't getting mad because they are not being looked after.
Okay,
Keeping their options open.
I gotta say, I like a lot of these elements. I think there's like a fun Charlie Kaufman type movie in here. I got really lost in the pitch and like, why is this happening and what exactly are we doing? I mean, you seem to be saying that our main character is frozen for a majority of the movie. Is that right?
Yes. She's frozen through the second act.
There's two elements here that I think are complicating this. Like, one is just the logic of like getting the audience on board with really making that decision. It's going to be very difficult. I think maybe there's a way to pull it off, but I think most people are going to be thinking, if your problem is not seeing each other enough, you should spend more time together, not less. So that's like, I think, one thing that is going to be difficult. The second thing, which we haven't even talked about yet, is the fact that the entire second act of the movie is in her mind, right? So everything that is like set up in the first act, we're somewhat abandoning because we're not going to be able to actually play the game that you've established where one goes to sleep, the other does their thing. We see what that complications that leads to. They go to sleep, the other one wakes up. Oh, here's some complications that have arisen in this plan. Like, that's the game you're promising us. But then, so even if you got me on board with that, then your second act is just essentially you're saying it's all a dream, and I think that's a big leap as well, because you're setting up something and then you're not giving it to us,
Right. The high concept romantic comedy that's being set up where your main characters almost can't interact, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's some hurdles there. I agree. I think it's provocative, but it has to be able to withstand, the weight of logic that you're asking the audience to buy into. And I'm struggling with that aspect of this.
Does that give you some good stuff to work with, Ray?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's super helpful. Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to. If I'm supposed to try to answer the problems or just kind of like take it in and listen and use that to help me.
Either way,
we're towards the end of the time, but yeah. Any last thoughts that you have?
No, thank you. That was super helpful.
No,
I do know that these are kind of the story problems that I have to solve. And making sure that it doesn't feel like, oh, it was all a dream. Is part of what's really important in the second act, but it's also part of what I'm hoping to use to make the movie fun and to give them what they're looking for in terms of stuff to make the lead actor happy and take it to places that are wild and genre and fun in terms of the genres they get to explore and fun visually as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool.
And best of luck with your adaptation.
Oh, thank you so much.
So it's kind of like Pineapple Express made Scooby-Doo. So these two stoners move into a haunted house, only to find out that the ghost haunting the house is also a stoner. And they go on this kind of adventure to solve how the ghost got murdered.
Oh, okay, awesome. I see that's not in your logline, is that right?
Yeah. So that's what I was just going to point out as well. There's nothing about the mystery in the logline. Why don't you read your logline so we get that?
Yeah, can you read that for the recording?
Two ganja smoking slackers unknowingly move into a haunted house, only to find an unlikely friend and their roommate, the ghost that has been haunting them.
Gotcha. Okay. And now that we
Okay.
have that, let's give us the 1 minute version of the story.
So they move into, they sell this app idea to this tech mogul for a dating app for morticians. The mogul buys the app, and then they come into all this money. So they buy this haunted house, and the first bit of the movie is them kind of being haunted by this ghost, and then turning point one is them meeting the ghost and finding out that he's like also pretty chill. And then they set out on this adventure to solve how the ghost has been murdered. And really, at the end of the movie, the big twist is that it was a tech mogul guy that killed the ghost, and it was all part of an elaborate scheme that the real estate agent who sold the house to them was in on.
Sure. Well, as we have mentioned, the log line, just from a log line perspective, you want to let us know what the action of the second act actually is going to be. So you're going to want to edit this log line, to show that they are going to embark on, this mystery to uncover who, killed this new friend of theirs. So that's just, as far as log line construction, going forward, you should add that in there. I guess my main question is, whose story is this? Because, we've got our two slackers and we have our ghost. The mystery being solved helps the ghost. I assume, like, if they solve his murder, he gets to go on to heaven or something like that. But like, what's the journey of our two heroes who you are positioning as like our protagonists, at least in the log line, so it's like they can help their friend, that's fine, but what how are they growing and changing, and what are the stakes for them in this whole situation?
Nothing really in particular. Yeah, that's definitely something to think about.
Okay, so this is not something you've written yet, right?
It is.
Oh, it is.
Oh, you have written it.
Yeah, I have just one draft though, so it's I'm still very much in the early process of editing it.
Okay, so what are we doing in Act 2? Are we, like, doing car chases and stuff? Like, trying to track down bad guys? Are we, like, in an old mansion looking for clues? Like, what exactly are we doing in the second act?
So, yeah, Act 2 is kind of like, it's like Scooby-Doo, where they go around from place to place, or like one of those, it's a mystery type of movie. So they go from situation to situation, led on by certain clues. The first clue being he was murdered by a poisoned dart, so they go and find the type of poison and at like a lab, and then they're led to a different place, and then they get like kind of in a muddle and go to a dispensary, and then the ghost is not familiar with what a dispensary is, so you get to see that, and then the dispensary leads them to find a different clue, and then they get back on the adventure. So it's that type of.
So the ghost is with them on all these journeys.
Yeah, the ghost is with them. Yeah, and I was kind of thinking of it as like he looks like it's played by a actor, but he's just like a little bit see-through looking.
Okay, so this is like an Adult Swim kind of tone for this whole movie.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, I think that all works, and I think the structure that you have is functional and is like the idea of the bumbling stoner quest, the sort of Harold and Kumar type of deal, is a good way to kind of have more sort of episodic scenarios that you do have linked together by the idea that, the part of the fun is how they possibly, like, they get the wrong clue, but they end up at the right thing anyway. They, like the fact that this is a stoner comedy allows you to have a little bit looser of a like connecting tissue between these things than you would normally need if this was a super straight like noir mystery, for instance. I will say make sure in your presentation of this, just kind of highlight what it is that we're going to be doing. Maybe having some kind of antagonist or like focusing on an antagonist would help you.
I do kind of have the antagonist in there. Like, so the whole way through, the tech mogul guy is watching them kind of in a Wicked Witch of the West type way and tracking their every move. And they're messing up his plan, and he's arguing with the real estate agent, and then they have to throw them back off their tracks.
Okay, so it's not just episodic incident after incident. We are actually going head to head with the same enemy forces again and again. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so you got to make that clear, because right now it just seems like we're doing one unrelated, silly, bumbling adventure. Then we walk into the street and get hit by a car. Now we're in the hospital, and we just sort of like are drifting from one thing to one thing. But in reality, you have a consistent villain who is sending bad guys after our heroes. This is a little bit more like Scooby-Doo. So I think that this is all there. This just comes down to sort of your presentation of it.
My question is, how is the addition of the ghost as part of this trio impacting all this stuff that you're talking about that's happening in the second act? Because that's the thing that, we have Dude, Where's My Car? And we have Harold and Kumar. And we even have Scooby-Doo, like we've got a lot of stuff like this already. So the one thing you're injecting into it is a ghost that is, along for the ride in this sort of comedic sense. So how is the ghost impacting their progress and like contributing to, the fun of the movie in a way that we're not getting from all those other movies?
So actually similar to that last one, there's this sort of time capsule aspect where he was killed in I think like 2004. It's in my notes somewhere. So he's like unfamiliar with like a lot of newer things that happened over the last 15 years. So there is that part of it. And then as a ghost, he has like certain ghost superpowers that sort of help them along the adventure.
Yeah, I could get that. So he can like possess people or like use poltergeist telekinesis and things like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I can see how we're solving a mystery with a ghost. I see how that's fun, and I guess we're all sort of stoners. We have a couple comments in the chat. People are asking, what happens if he doesn't do this? Is it that we have to, sort of the implicit quest with a ghost trying to find out the details of their death is that we're trying to put them to rest in whatever way. So once they finish this quest, does their friend go away?
He does not. No, I was thinking about having that in there, but I just kind of, I wanted to have it be kind of more buddy-buddy and they stay at the end together.
Well, that connects to my point from earlier, which is like, I understand the journey for the ghost, though you're saying he doesn't go to heaven. So that I would say that's something to think about, because that's where you can get emotionality at the end of this. At the end of these guys have to choose whether or not, like if they solve this crime, then he goes away. And that's going to be sad for them. So that's the kind of journey, like you want to be looking for to add an emotional component to this, I don't know if you ever saw that TV show Deadbeat on Hulu, but it's in a similar zone as to what you're talking about. And one of the big subplots is there's a girl that he loves and she's a ghost and he can talk to ghosts. And he has a clue about how she died and he doesn't tell her because he doesn't want her to leave. He doesn't want her to go to the afterlife or whatever. So he knowingly sort of keeps her as a ghost, and that provides compelling emotional drama, even though that's a comedy. So I think one thing I see a lot in comedies is people tend to discount the fact that you need to still have an emotional core. And the fact that I asked you that question and you were like, yeah, I don't know. That shows that seems like it might be missing from this. But you have an opportunity for that because there's an inherent conflict at the end of this story in which this guy has to go away if they solve the crime, if you wanted to do it. And that can easily provide you an emotional core. So that's something I would consider.
Or our main characters all die in the investigation as well, and then at the end they get to hang out as ghosts forever.
That's also possible.
I love it.
Great job. I love this genre. Idle Hands is one of my favorite movies. That sort of occult supernatural comedy is it's a great space to be in. So nice work.
In 1991, a teenage tour guide at a historic prison in her small Wyoming town teams up with a visiting FBI agent to solve a string of murders that copy crimes committed in the prison when it was open.
Ooh. I am into this. My only question looking at the logline is why on earth an FBI agent would team up with a teenager, but I'm guessing you probably get to that in your pitch. So let's, Scott, do you have questions before we have her just tell it to us?
Yeah, well, I think, the coming of age aspect, is what, just in her description of the genres, thriller / coming of age, was intriguing to me. But then as I'm I'm seeing this log line. I understand there's a teenager in it, but I don't understand how what's here equals a coming of age story, because it just sounds like a serial killer investigation wherein the teenager is one of the detectives. So it's like tonally, I'm wondering about how that works.
Yeah, I have a guess, but I think we should just let you go right into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Misty is a recent high school graduate and basically poor white trash in a small Western town. She lives with her single mom, who's a drug addict, and she really has no prospects for a better life, no money to go to college. She's basically going to turn into her mother. And she loves true crime. She works as a tour guide at a historic prison. So during the day, the tours are like straight historical, in 1888, they laid the foundation, blah, blah. But at night, the teenagers, all the tour guides are teenagers, run around in costumes, telling spooky stories and basically jumping out and scaring people. There's a gas chamber, there's gallows, so they get to tell all these gruesome stories. So on one of Misty's day tours, a former inmate shows up, someone who was in this prison when it was open. And that same night, one of the tour guides is murdered after the night tour. And then Agent Collins, who's an FBI agent who's basically been demoted, she comes to town on a routine information gathering mission, but she quickly gets sucked into the murder investigation, much to the chagrin of the local cops. And more murders happen throughout the second act, and Collins realizes that Misty has this encyclopedic knowledge of all the crimes that happened at the prison. She's the only one who's read all the files, and she's working on the museum exhibits. She wants to help Collins with the investigation, and Collins is like, A, it's not my investigation. I'm an FBI agent, not the cops, and B, you're 18. But gradually, she shows her knowledge and Collins becomes a role model for Misty, basically shows her a possible route out of this small town, like a career that she could possibly be interested in. So then really it just becomes is she going to survive long enough to escape from, the real prison, but also the metaphorical prison of her life in this dead-end town.
Why is the FBI involved?
She initially she got demoted and sent to a field office in Denver, and her boss is giving her a shit assignment. She has to just come and get one piece of information on an inmate. But then she's there when they discover the first murder.
Wait, it's the first murder, but it says it's a string in the logline.
Yeah, and then there's subsequent murders.
Happen.
Oh, they happen after this.
So that's just that's a little bit of convenience.
Yes, it is. It's a little coincidence.
Yeah. I just wonder if it wouldn't be simpler if it's just the sheriff in the town or something. But I guess, that's something you'd have to read to see how plausible it feels. Because typically FBI is not called in until there is we're dealing with a serial killer. Then the FBI comes in.
I think there's an easy fix here. It's just that the one of her coworkers and friends is the victim of this serial killer, right?
Correct.
If that was just one in a string, then the FBI would come and investigate, because that would be the work of an active serial killer that they're trying to catch, wouldn't it? So then you wouldn't need that coincidence of her just happening to be there, right? Or am I off track?
I don't think the FBI necessarily gets involved for a serial killer. I think it's more to do with interstate. If it's more than one state, then they have to bring in the feds.
Yeah, that's also probably true. Yeah. So
I'm not sure the details.
Though if this could also, the previous murders that happened at the prison could be something this agent was involved in or is curious about. Anyway, there's ways to fix that, but that was something that, jumped out at me as why is the FBI involved, and does it have to be the FBI? Is it simpler if it's just a local cop? Does the action of the movie, are all the murders taking place in the prison?
Yes. In the guard tower, in the recreation room. Yeah, they're all in the prison.
And they're all matching the previous killings in the same spots and stuff that were in the prison?
Exactly.
Right. So why is the prison staying open? Why are people still in there?
It's just a museum, right?
Yeah, what happens is after the first murder, tourism increases. It's like Jaws, people start coming to see where this gruesome murder happens. And the site director of the prison is like, were finally making money on ticket sales, so he keeps it open.
Based on the death of their employees, though?
Yeah. That's what I was just going to say. That feels almost like some of this feels a bit like comedic to me, like light, like the teenage aspect, I guess. And like that idea that we're going to keep giving tours of this prison, even though people are being murdered, I think is definitely a tough pill to swallow.
Okay. No, it should not be funny.
I'm not exactly. So is this something you've written already?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Why specifically are all these murders happening within the prison, and why can't they just be all over town to give us more sort of like stuff to do and like a reason that we don't have to keep this is like an active crime scene essentially.
Right.
Well, why would employees even?
I think the crimes that they're copying are crimes that happened in the prison years and years ago.
I guess I see that, but why would people keep coming to work if?
I mean, that's what I'm saying is the logic issue in people being available to kill within the prison is where I am stumbling with this, because it's like once one murder happens, it's highly unlikely they reopen anytime soon. Once two happen, then it's definitely done and no one's going to be in there.
No one's going to give a tour of a place their friend just got slaughtered.
Yeah. I mean, so like, I think people are being killed outside and brought to but bodies are being placed within the prison, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But it is definitely tough to understand how that is allowed to continue if we're in a straightforward, like tonally sort of dark, gritty, realistic type of world. So that's something to think about. I like how you're selling that. And maybe somehow in the script you're selling it, but that's definitely where my mind is like, how is this actually possible for the killer to keep finding victims?
Yeah, unless this is all one night or like all one sitting.
No, it's not all one night. It's basically the short version is there was a kind of drug distribution conspiracy happening, and the person who's committing the murders is killing off his co-conspirators, to get rid of any evidence and anyone who could testify against him. But he's making them look like the murders from the prison just to make it.
If that's his motive, why make it look like that? Isn't that harder for him?
It is, but I mean, it's in my mind, it's to throw people off the trail.
Is he trying to make it seem like the prison's haunted and they're being killed by like the ghosts of the inmates or something?
Yes.
Oh, he is. Okay. So I think you have a really strong basis here. You may have to just look at the logline for a moment, and like the fact that we're having a teenager team up with an FBI agent to solve a string of murders is cool and good. The fact that you're not including in the logline is that she's obsessed with true crime, and that actually starts to make sense as to why the FBI agent might need her. Yeah. It's like you are an expert in these things because you are obsessed with this. You are like a true crime prodigy or whatever. That actually makes sense and is a cool way to get those characters together and for the FBI to see, okay, I'm out of my depth here. I don't know the local history of all of these, specific crimes that seem to relate to what's going on now. So I think you've got to set up your main character as a true crime obsessed tour guide at a prison who teams up with this FBI agent because they're like, she wants to, and the FBI agent is sort of forced to say, we need this kind of help, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I totally agree. Please. Why 1991?
Pre-cell phones and pre-internet. So she's really, truly stuck. Well, no. I mean, I think that it's a lot easier now for people in small towns to get a sense of like the rest of the world. I think back in the pre-internet days, it's very hard to imagine yourself being anywhere else, living anywhere else, doing anything else, because people just don't have access to the rest of the world in the same way.
I think.
Yeah, I see it.
I mean, I see a lot of scripts doing that, and I think it's hard to justify a period. Like, one thing you want to consider is how much cost you're adding to making this film. Like when you're considering what you're writing and thinking about a path to production, when you're going period, even 1991, it's adds a huge cost. So I would really consider if that's absolutely necessary. And then the other thing I would say about it is the true crime thing, like, really speaks to now in terms of we have all these true crime podcasts and everything like that. And then people are obsessed with that. That was really not the case in 1991. And, obviously there were some things like that existed, but it is not like now. So I think you're also kind of missing an opportunity to comment on something that is current by putting it in this sort of arbitrary time frame. So just some things to think about, how you could actually get more out of being present day, and you're adding a roadblock to production by going into a period that is not entirely necessary for the story.
Okay, I gotcha.
I agree.
I have an inn, I guess. I actually did used to work in a prison like this, and I still know the person who runs it. I mean, I think the town is really not going to look all that different than it did in 1991, so I don't think there would be
possible
as many, definitely clothing and hairstyles and things like that, but I don't know how much other period work would need to be done.
Right.
Well, like every car, for example, things like that. It adds up surprisingly. So just something to consider.
Yes.
No, absolutely. That's a good thought, and I'll take it.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you, Caroline. I think we have time for one more.
Thanks, guys.
Do one more, yeah.
Yeah, let's do one more.
Yep, thank you.
I wanted to do JT if he's here.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Oh, which one was that?
That's the trip sitter. It's in the middle of the logline page.
Okay.
So the log line is, after taking psychedelics for the first time in a secluded mountain home, a group of teenagers must survive a seemingly random home invasion as they become increasingly high. It's left to the one timid friend who stayed sober, the trip sitter, to protect her friends from both the invaders and themselves.
I love this. Scott, any comments before the pitch?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds fun. I'm wondering, once these kids are high, and we see what that is, how is it not going to get redundant? How is it not the same joke over and over? So perhaps you should elaborate.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so this movie, it's about this timid high schooler, Jana, and she is terrified of rejection. And so even when she's uncomfortable, she really wants to be accepted by her friend group. And so when they schedule a time when they set aside a time to go to one of their friends, like uncle's mountain home, and try out some drugs, she's excited. She's part of the group. They ask her if she'll be the one to be the trip sitter to make sure no one hurts themselves, and she can't find it within her to stand up for what she wants, and so she accepts. So the moment everyone takes the psychedelic, a home invasion begins. Someone gets abducted. That's very important. No one really dies on screen. People get taken to a place we don't know where. And as the invasion begins, everyone is still sober, as in the drugs haven't taken effect. So it's her best friend Libby who takes charge, starts making a plan, and ignoring all of Jana's thoughts and advice about how they should combat things, which only gets them into deeper trouble. And once her friends start to become higher and higher, she has to take charge and stop them from getting taken one by one, until she is at the end of the movie. She finds where they're taken. A rogue splinter cell of Dare has taken these teenagers and is going to kill them with an overdose to make it look like all these teenagers died from drugs, and thus to revitalize Dare's mission. And they discover that the drugs allow them to actually be in touch with the earth and with everything that's happening, and actually give them advantage over the home invaders. And the third act is Home Alone on drugs, Teenage Home Alone on drugs. I
kind of thought that'd be the second act. So what was the second act exactly?
The second act is their it's them doing the general home invasion stuff of trying to hide everything, protect themselves, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had the same
so
thought,
we're hiding and escaping from. Yeah, it seems like the hook was sort of home invasion on drugs, but then when you went into it, it seems to be the second act is we're not on drugs, we're just hiding, and then we don't actually get to the hook until the end. First half of the second act is the drugs are taking effect. Second half of the second act is they're running away on drugs. Third act is they fight back on drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that that it's not the issue that because I was thinking the same thing. As we get into the second act, they're on drugs, but the entire second act being that is a lot. But also wonder if you're delaying what the big idea is until halfway through the movie. I feel a little bit, denied what I was promised, you know? So that's a tough spot to be in, because the whole first half just sounds like standard teenage home invasion comedy, which is a lot to go through since we have a lot of those before getting to the stuff that makes it different, you know? Then once we get there, you know, I could see how there's some fun, and it being, you know, only the second half that we really are living in there. I could see it also not getting tired for that portion, but it's a long wait to get to it. So that would be my concern. And then I'll just add one other thing, you know, tonally, I'm not sure exactly what your comps are, but like if you're going to go with the idea that like this whole thing is a group of like dare you know, extremists or whatever, it's extremely broad, extremely broad, and not realistic obviously in any way, whereas I think the other components of this idea are very possible, you know. So I would just consider a more grounded reason why this is happening. Like I understand you're trying to do like a sort of drug joke with that, but it's going to push it to like a level of broadness that I think is going to be a harder sell. Broad comedies like really don't get made very much. But I think if you scale that back, and you just focused on the concept, which is them being on the drugs and dealing with whatever regular home invaders, I would think that it would have more potential. Just going so broad, I think, is often tricky in terms of actually selling a script.
It may be in just how you kind of presented it here as well. Maybe in the script, it plays it a little bit more like something like We Summon the Darkness or The Babysitter, where it's like religious extremists essentially who happen to be under this banner, but it's not like, you know, when you pitch it as it's a rogue dare sell, that's very funny, but it sounds like it belongs in Harold and Kumar rather than the movie rather than Your Next, if you've seen Your Next.
Yes.
But then again, in the script itself, are they portrayed as like, is it like played for really wacky comedy, these villains, or are they played a little more straight and just like psychotic?
They're played straight and psychotic. I was gonna say my comps are Your Next meets The Babysitter.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I watch like all of these movies, so I'm very familiar with the sort of territory you're in. I will say, yeah, I agree with everything that Scott has brought up here. It feels like we're kind of getting to the main meat of your hook kind of late, and then we're not actually no one's actually dying until the end, though, is what you're saying.
There is a tonally. I don't want to kill any of these teenagers because we like them, and this is more of a comedy horror than a horror comedy. Someone does die in the middle. A pizza delivery man dies. But no one really dies till the end.
Okay. I would say the fact that we like your characters means that they actually should be dying, I would argue personally, because then we are more invested with the story rather than less. I mean, if we're watching what we expect to be a slashy home invasion movie, it'll feel kind of weird if they're just getting kidnapped. I'll be like, what is going to be the twist here? Is this aliens responsible for this or something? Like, it seems a little off to me that we're not killing anyone until the end.
No, that's fair. Yeah, totally. I've been struggling with this. I'm just trying to find a way to like kill people we like while also keeping the comedy in there.
It can be done. I would watch things like Idle Hands is a great example of this. Evil Dead, like any of those where you know, the fact that they're a likable group of characters doesn't mean that you shouldn't be murdering them. I would say I sound like a psychopathic crazy person, don't I?
I agree, though. I mean, the more we like them, the sadder it is when they die, and the more we feel about this journey. You know, so I don't think you should worry too much. You know, look at Shaun of the Dead. Everybody dies. You know, it's like, but we love that cast of characters. So you want the audience to be sad when people die in a movie like this, for sure.
Yeah, it feels like you're lowering the effect of lowering the stakes is worse than the effect of we get to keep all our friends.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Totally. Oh, totally. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, I guess we should call it.
Cool. Yeah.
Any thoughts to sum up this session, or trends that we've seen, or tips that you want to give people moving forward when it comes to pitching and like based on what we've seen today?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we see is that these log lines don't actually give what the story is, the real story. And so that's something that I think everyone needs to like really take into consideration when they're putting together their log lines is, are they actually zeroing in on what the story is truly about and who the heroes are and what their journey is, because it's frequently we get into the actual pitch and then it's like, oh, that's what this is. Okay. So that's like, a big thing that keeps happening. So I would say if whoever's listening, really try and take that to heart when you're putting your log lines together.
Yes, we want to hear enough of your story that it can bloom in the mind, as they say, to imply the rest of the entire journey. But we also have to know what we're going to be watching. Within your logline itself, you need to include whatever the second act kind of is, because the second act is your movie. In terms of this is what everything from the trailer is going to be really drawn from. This is what, when you say this is a movie about blank that happens, you're trying to sell your friends on something. Imagine what do you tell your friends when you tell them what this awesome movie you just saw is about? You're probably going to tell them it's second act. Right? It's like whatever is going on in the second act is like your selling point, and it's your strongest thing that you need to put forward and not hide or obfuscate. Just focus on clarity and brevity in these things. It's a good idea to practice your pitch a couple times just by yourself. You really only want about 3 sort of paragraphs written out for these. And I just wanted to thank everyone too for contributing today. This takes a lot to get on a mic in front of a bunch of strangers. Yeah. Thank you everybody for participating. Big round of applause to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody.
I also teach a private class. So if you're interested in joining that, just feel free to send me a message. So let us know, and feel free to write in the chat channels of this Screenwriters Network if you have specific events or types of stuff you'd want to see, specific classes that you would be down for. I will be doing a class on musicals next month. All right, I guess we should tell everyone goodnight, and thank you again for contributing. We loved hearing all your log lines, and great job receiving feedback and taking it to heart.
Yep, thanks guys.